Well, there certainly has been a lot of talk in private equity and venture capital circles in the last few weeks as the events have started to unfold in regards to StrongRoom AI, which was a medical based, sort of startup business. It started up in 2017, had three co founders, had taken in quite a lot of capital over the years, and it was sort of valued somewhere between 50 and 70 million dollars, had gained quite a bit of success and traction and accolades. And the latest round of capital that went in from EVP, which is a well-known, well-respected PE VC firm, resulted in a catastrophic range of events. And there's going to be a lot of scrutiny on this whole scenario. It is before the courts. There's been a lot of sort of activity to secure assets and so on. But basically, in a nutshell, the VC firm that put in the last tranche of capital within 2 weeks was referring the vehicle across to the police and bringing in the lawyers, and was very, very unhappy about a range of conversations that had taken place. And effectively, if you're to sort of take the allegations at face value, the company had been reporting a very strong position to its partners, and particularly its venture capital partners. And the truth of the matter was that the company was actually losing quite large amounts of capital on a monthly basis. There was a very high cash burn rate, and there's a big question mark around how funds have been used, tax issues, etc., etc. Now, there were a lot of warning signs, and for the board of directors, the board was made up of, in some cases, investors who had put funds into the business or were representatives of various PE VC firms that had backed this vehicle over a period of time. But there's definitely a pattern of emerging here through the court documents and through the commentary that the financial controls, the governance was definitely lacking. And we had a couple of key moments in time. So we had a CFO who joined the business in January and resigned within about 8 weeks. That is a massive warning sign to a board. That individual, I believe, has gone on to be a whistleblower to indicate that there were a lot of issues with the finances and how finances were being treated in the business. And there were at least 2 other whistleblowers, and one of those has gone to the ATO to talk about tax issues and potentially fraudulent matters. And right across the whole gambit, there's been a lot of very unhappy staff. And, so as a board of directors, and particularly for PE, VC-backed vehicles, I've been raising capital myself over many, many years. And, there's a lot of challenges in this space, and you have to have rigorous financial and governance controls, because the nature of these businesses is that, everyone likes to talk the good story. Everyone likes to pump the asset. Everyone wants to buy into the $100 million valuation. People have already in their mind spent the money before it actually rolls through the door. And these create ecosystems where there's a lot of pump and enthusiasm for the vehicle. Good entrepreneurs who talk a good talk, who are constantly selling. But behind the closed doors, sometimes they're not being frank. And when things are going wrong, they don't feel they can be honest with their business partners and their constituents. And there's this constant kind of need to have this always on positive press news story, even to the PE VC firms. So the reality is, I think what will come out in this case, and often in a lot of these vehicles, things were going wrong for quite a period of time. There were cultural issues. There was a kind of a fear mindset. We can't let the partners know what's really going on here. And, someone starts to, cover up for problem A. create problem B. There's a bit of a shuffle of the money, trying to cover tracks, and then all of a sudden the problem just starts to snowball. So I think it's a big lesson for certainly aspiring and current board directors who are serving in this space. You really have to have a close, really close look at the finances and the use of the funds. And particularly when there's large injections of capital, I personally believe funds should be drip fed in these environments, and there should be a very clear idea of where the funds are going and what the funds are being used for. If you put in large sums of money, there's a very good chance that it can be shuffled around to sort of cover up problem A, B, and C. So look, they're challenging environments. I think the whole strong AI example is going to be an absolute tragedy for everyone involved. This wasn't really, it just didn't appear on the circuit recently. There's probably been nearly a decade of hard work to get to this point. And for this to happen to the partner who's put in the capital, for this to now be referred to police, to legal matters, legal action now being taken in the courts, this being referred through to ATO and other authorities, it is a real tragedy. There's no two ways about it. And it's sad that everyone got to that position that they thought they had to lie, they had to cover up, they had to pretend things were going better than they were. And keep in mind, these are all allegations at this stage, and I put my caveat before, during, and after this video. But there certainly is some things being reported that are very alarming. So for boards of directors going forward, particularly where there's injections of capital, there has to be very, very clear financial governance controls around that capital and how it's being used. It has to be used for what you are saying it's going to be used for, and sometimes it's better to drip feed in funds or hold funds in sort of a trust fund or an escrow account, and then it gets released as the funds are needed. Very rarely do you need 17 million all on one day. There is usually a bank of things that need to be done over a period of time, and so having really good financial controls are crucial. Having very good relationships with your CFO and the checks and the balances there, and obviously a massive warning sign is when CFOs resign after short periods of time. That is an absolute warning sign that you must do exit interviews. You must understand what's gone on there. Why has a chief financial officer decided to leave so quickly? And of course, don't ignore your whistleblowers when people are telling you, approaching the board of directors saying, look, things are not quite right. The CEO is a difficult person to work with. He's not doing this right. He's not doing that right. Don't ignore those warning signs. It's a good opportunity for the board to get onto the floor and start to see what's really going on. These are entrepreneurial environments, and I appreciate that there's, the cut and thrust of business, and there is the sort of the pumping of the vehicle to achieve great things, and that's the nature of these vehicles. But we have to have an ecosystem where the parties can be frank and honest with each other. And sometimes having multiple private equity partners all in the vehicle, all hoping for great outcomes, all looking for their exit, creates a lot of pressure on the executive leadership team. Now, I don't know if that was the case in this vehicle, but it certainly can be very, very challenging when you have a lot of investors who are looking for those big paydays and have very, very high expectations. And so you've got to always, as an entrepreneur, be very, very balanced in your views as to how you're going to achieve, those great, sort of goals. But it'll be very interesting to see how this unfolds. I'm sure there'll be a lot more commentary on this in future weeks, but certainly a very sad day in the community, and it can sometimes turn other people off investing in the community when there's a very, very bad situation like this. But we'll watch this one with interest. I'm sure there'll be a lot of lessons to be learned, and I think for board directors it's an opportunity to just really reset with your organisation. Do you have the checks and the balances in place? Are you comfortable with your leadership team? Are you being told the truth? Do you have the mechanisms to uncover fraudulent behaviour so that these things don't get out of control? and we have a good experience all the way through.